Hi, everyone, and welcome to Solar for Multifamily Rental Buildings in New York City. You are in the right place. We're going to give folks a few minutes before we get started to join. My name is Noah Ginsberg from Solar One. I'm here with Jose Galvez Contreras and Marigo Farr. We're going to give it a few minutes before we get started. We are going to launch a brief poll that's optional, just to tell us who you are, so that we can tailor our presentation to the audience that's here.
We have a question of what's the difference between a small multifamily and a large multifamily building?
A fair question. We don't have there's no hard fast number. I guess we could say, let's say less than 10 units is a small multifamily. Hi to those of you who just joined. Welcome to Solar from Multifamily Rental Buildings. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, probably at 9:03. We're going to kick this off. But welcome, and look forward to spending an hour with you this morning.
And please make sure to fill in the poll as you are coming in, and that we can get familiar a little bit with you. So try to fill the poll as you are waiting for us to start.
Thanks, Jose. And actually, on that note, just an administrative thing. So we're going to be doing Q&A throughout this presentation at the end of sections. Please use the chat function to submit your questions. We will be reviewing them as they come in, and we'll do our very best to address all of the questions. If you're on a computer, you can find chat at the bottom of your screen in the middle. If you're joining from a cell phone, there are 3 dots, and if you tap those 3 dots, then you'll see the chat option. So hope that everyone is able to get their questions answered. All right, so I think in the interest of time, we only have an hour today and a lot to cover. We're going to kick it off. Marigo is going to be kicking off the presentation momentarily.
All right. Welcome, folks. It's good to see we have a bunch of multifamily rental people here, both small and large. So that's great. And it looks like most of you don't have solar yet. So we're here to help you with that. My name is Marigo. I'm a program manager at Solar One, and we're going to get started. Also, Noah and Jose, if you want to just also introduce yourselves as we go.
Awesome. I'm Jose Galvez Contreras. I'm also a project manager here at Solar One, and I will be more of a support here to the team. So if you have any technical assistance, like questions regarding your Zoom, I will be responding them via the chat, and I will be also moderating the Q&A section. So I hope you enjoy this presentation.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Marigo. And I'm Noah Ginsberg. I'm director of Solar One's Solar Technical Assistance Program.
Great. So our agenda for today, a brief introduction to Solar One and Here Comes Solar. We're going to do a little Solar Technology 101, then talk about how to save money with solar, and then specific considerations for building owners. And then we'll walk you through our program and have you learn a little bit more about how we offer technical assistance. And as Noah mentioned, we'll do some Q&A at the end of each section, and then also at the end, hopefully we'll have a little more time. So Solar One, we're an environmental education nonprofit established in 2004 with the belief that all New Yorkers can help overcome our environmental challenges. We have a range of different projects. The one that we're going to focus on today is Here Comes Solar. So what's the status of solar in New York City? As some of you may know, solar costs have declined over the years, both here and abroad, but New Yorkers still face specific barriers. So there's a lot of construction red tape, a lot of permitting for solar projects here that can take a while and be costly. There's some system complexity for multifamily buildings. And then we have a dense urban environment, which means that not all buildings are suitable to solar, and it can take a little bit of extra analysis to figure out whether a project is viable. So to respond to that, we developed a program called Here Comes Solar. It's an initiative of Solar One where we provide technical assistance to building owners to make adopting solar simple and affordable. So it's a multi-stage process, starting out with a site evaluation and solar design upon you sending us your address, and then knowledge building, financing and incentive consultation to the building owner, solar installer selection assistance, and consumer advocacy during the installation and really the whole process. So we're acting as a third party to support you to have a successful solar project. Some of our clients that we work with, a range of market rate clients and affordable housing. Recently, we were working on a large project with LaFrac organization as well. And these range in scale from a 10-building portfolio to some of the largest multifamily solar installations in New York City. So the importance of solar for New York City. Buildings account for 70% of New York City's greenhouse gas emissions. So being able to generate clean energy on the buildings themselves is a really great opportunity for offsetting those emissions. Also, New York City's Climate Mobilization Act will put a price on carbon and require solar on new construction projects. So we want to get ahead of the game with that. Solar benefits New York City's old constrained grid. It reduces building operating expenses, and it's the fastest growing sector putting New Yorkers to work. So Noah's going to take it away with solar technology.
Great, thanks, Marigo. We're going to do a really quick primer on solar technology. Just first introducing concepts. So this is a diagram of a rooftop solar energy system. As you can see, there are solar panels mounted on the rooftop. We're in the Northern Hemisphere here in New York. So ideally, those solar panels are going to face south, although practically speaking, solar panels in New York can face east, west, or south, really just not north, and still be quite efficient. Those solar panels capture the sunlight. When the sun hits the solar panels, that creates electricity, direct current electricity. That power flows through wires in a conduit down to an inverter that takes that power and converts it into a usable form for the building. And then there's a meter that measures the electricity that's produced. And the electricity that's produced on a rooftop will either be used instantaneously within a building, reducing the amount of electricity that that building needs to purchase from Con Edison, or during the day when it's nice and sunny and there's not so much electricity usage, that electricity could actually flow out to Con Edison's system through the meter. The meter is going to record that flow of electricity and build up essentially a credit, a bank that the building can draw into at night when the sun's not shining, or even a bank that could be rolled over from month to month and offset winter bills when there's less sun. I want to talk about a few sort of definitions or nomenclature. So measuring solar capacity. A solar energy system's capacity is the amount of power that the system will produce in ideal conditions. This is really, you could think of this as the size of the system. So a solar energy system's size is measured in watts, just like light bulbs, the difference being that light bulbs consume electricity and solar panels produce it. A typical solar array for a multifamily building in New York City is going to be somewhere in the range of 15,000 to 50,000 watts, or 15 to 50 kilowatts. That's just a rough range. It really does depend. We have an example project we're going to be highlighting later on in this presentation that's larger. It's 120 kilowatts. The project that we worked on with Stuytown Property Services is 3.8 megawatts. And we've worked on projects that are as small as 5 kilowatts. So it really does range, but kind of in the middle, 15 to 50 kilowatts is typical. So solar capacity is the size of a solar energy system, but what we really care about is solar energy. Over time, solar installations produce energy, which is measured in kilowatt hours. The bigger your solar energy system, the more capacity you have, the more energy you'll generate. And importantly, the more energy you generate on your rooftop, the more money you save on your electric bill. So a little bit about solar panels themselves. Solar panels are a really reliable technology. The technology that we use today is really similar to the technology that was being used 30, 40 years ago. The technology is so rugged because it was developed for use in remote locations where there was no power. You can think about locations like Antarctica, outer space. That's really the first solar electric applications. And the technology that we use in the satellites is really not so different from what we use on rooftops today. The big difference is that the costs have come down to earth. Solar panels come with a 25-year warranty on their power output, which, as far as we know, is one of the longest warranties you can have on a product. So it's really reliable, low maintenance. Solar panels themselves do not have any moving parts. So there's not a whole heck of a lot that can break with the solar panels themselves. They do require direct sunlight. So when we screen a building for solar viability, one of the things we look at is whether it's shaded from surrounding buildings. In other parts of the country, the thing that you're worried about is shade from trees. In New York City, it's skyscrapers. So we're always looking for a good southern exposure. And then another important element of solar arrays in New York City is that more than 99% of solar installations are grid connected without backup batteries. So what this means is that you're essentially using Con Edison's system as a battery. You generate power on your rooftop. If you generate more than you need at any time, you send that out to Con Edison. You've got a meter that's kind of measuring that flow of electricity and making sure you get the whole value of that energy on your bill. And then at night, when your solar panels are not producing, seamlessly, you're going to be importing your power from Con Edison, and it's all designed to work in concert. The one drawback of not having batteries is that when, in that very unlikely event that there's a blackout in New York City, even though you've got solar panels on your rooftop, you'll be down as well. There are some applications where batteries are being included in solar projects, but the process of getting an energy storage system permitted in New York City is still pretty cumbersome, and the technology is still fairly expensive, which is why we're not seeing so many batteries yet. So this is the other major component of a solar energy system. You have solar panels on the rooftop, and then you have an inverter, which converts that direct current power into alternating current power, which is the form that's distributed by the utility and used in our buildings. The picture on the left is of string inverters. These are the most common kind of inverter for multifamily buildings. Each of those inverters that are mounted on the wall are about the size of a mini fridge. In this case, those inverters are mounted in a basement electric room. They can also be mounted outside on a bulkhead on the rooftop if there's no space in the electric room. And then this is mostly for residential single-family home applications, but there are also microinverters, which are smaller inverters that actually get mounted behind each solar panel. The benefit of a microinverter is that there are a few benefits. One of the benefits of a microinverter is that it allows a solar energy system to produce really well in partial shade because each panel is being optimized. So if you get shade on one panel, it doesn't impact the next one. There's actually technology that goes with string inverters that can provide a similar benefit. The vast majority of solar projects that we've worked on in New York City have included string inverters, primarily because microinverters are more expensive. So this is one that we normally get a lot of questions about and a lot of concerns from property owners and asset managers. So the mounting method, how are solar panels affixed to a roof? There are two main ways to do it. A solar energy system can either be ballasted or it can be mechanically attached. A ballasted installation sits on top of the roof surface. There are minimal or no penetrations into the roof membrane, and the system sits on engineered trays, and there are ballast blocks, essentially cinder block, that are set underneath the solar panels in these trays to hold the system in place. They're engineered to meet all of the necessary wind requirements, and that's a very popular method, particularly for larger rooftops and low and mid-rise buildings. Mechanically attached systems are also quite popular here in the city. The mechanically attached systems do require roof penetrations. However, there are a number of benefits to a mechanically attached system for certain building types. The thing I want to stress is that both methods are perfectly acceptable, and it really depends on the type of building you're working with, what's going to make the most sense for you. A ballasted installation for a big roof is generally going to be your cheapest option, but with a mechanically attached system, you can typically fit more solar panels onto the same size roof. So that's a big benefit of mechanically attached systems. Another benefit of a mechanically attached system is that it's lighter weight overall. So a ballasted system might be 6 or 7 pounds per square foot, while a mechanically attached system might be 3 or 4 pounds per square foot. And then this is just, we already talked about kind of ballasted and mechanically attached. There are really two types of mechanically attached systems. There's what we call a planar array, or kind of a standard mechanically attached system that's relatively low to the roof, but it's up high enough that you can get over some vents and obstructions, which can be helpful. You can also do some roof repairs underneath there, patching if needed. There's another type of mechanically attached system that is of growing popularity in New York City, and that's the canopy array. So a canopy installation is actually elevated at least 9 feet above the roof surface. And there are a few major benefits to a canopy. With a canopy installation, you can get above the required height threshold for New York City's fire code. New York City's fire code requires 6-foot wide access pathways on rooftops so that firefighters can get on roofs and navigate around them if they need to fight a fire. Well, those 6-foot pathways on small buildings can take up a lot of real estate. One solution to that is to elevate your system 9 feet or more in the air so that you can really maximize the amount of solar on a rooftop. Another benefit of an elevated canopy system is that it does allow for multiple uses of a roof. So we've had clients who installed a canopy system because they had a goal or an intent to do a roof deck or a green roof in the future. So a canopy can be a good solution that doesn't preclude other options for uses of your roof. We should note that canopy installations are significantly more expensive. The most cost-effective option is a ballasted array if your building can support it. So what makes a building a good candidate for solar? It's really 3 things. A roof is going to need direct sunlight, southern exposure, open area and minimal obstruction. So, if you've got a whole bunch of rooftop mechanicals, you might not be the best candidate for solar, or you might require an elevated system of canopy. And then another important one is that you want to put solar on a new roof, or at least a roof that has a long life ahead of it. Keeping in mind that a solar energy system has a 25 to 30-year life, that lines up pretty nicely with a new well-installed roof. So best case scenario, you do those 2 things at the same time. You can install solar on a mid-cycle roof. We just would always recommend that the roof be evaluated and that you consider, if you anticipate needing to remove and reinstall your solar for a re-roofing project in the future, just to keep that in mind. So that concludes this section on solar technology. So we're going to pause here, and before we dive into solar economics, we're going to see if there are any questions on this section.
As of now, there are no questions on this section. So if anyone has any questions, please make sure to put them in the chat and we will be happy to answer them. So don't be shy.
Great. Well, let's keep going. We'll dive into economics, and if you have a question on solar technology, it's not too late. You can still put it in the chat box, and we'll get to it at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Amerigo, who's going to present on saving money with solar.
And I see a question that will be sort of well answered at the beginning of this section, so I think we can jump in. All right, so how much does solar cost? The way we talk about solar pricing, it's typically presented in a dollar per watt measurement, and it's influenced by system size and complexity. So someone just asked about if there a price difference between ballasted and other types. So yeah, there is. The price per watt will increase if you either have a smaller system, if you have a mechanically integrated system, as Noah just mentioned, where there's roof penetrations. For taller buildings, the price per watt is typically higher. If your building is over 7 stories and really anything beyond that, we'll start to see incur costs for longer conduit runs from the roof to the electrical room, or needing cranes, all that kind of stuff. And then creative system design. So an elevated system like a canopy, or just really more complex designs throughout the roof can increase the price per watt. What brings the price per watt down is a larger system, the ballasted array, as we talked about, that is a more simple installation, and bulk procurement. So if you're working with a larger building portfolio and you put them out to bid at once, you'll be able to get a better price per watt across the portfolio. So what that looks like, this is real pricing that we pulled from New York City solar projects in 2019. And just to show you, so the smaller the system size, the larger the weighted average price per watt. And then as you get to something like 120 kilowatts, it's dropped dramatically. And so just looking at a typical 30 kilowatt multifamily building in New York City, you might see, so 30,000 watts times $4 a watt, budget of $120,000. And we're going to go into right now how that upfront cost gets reduced dramatically with incentives. So how do you save money with solar? You have utility bill savings and you have tax bill savings. So tax bill savings and other incentives can be broken down as follows. The New York Sun incentive is a rebate from the state that the installer is responsible for filing the paperwork for and passing on 100% of the savings to the building. So upfront, you've already reduced something in the range of 15 to 30% of the project cost. Then there's also the investment tax credit, which is at the federal level, and a New York City property tax abatement. If you're able to successfully claim all these incentives, you can see that the majority of the system cost is actually reduced. We put a little star next to the investment tax credit just to let you all know that it's scheduled to decline to 22% next year and then 10% in the next year. And so what we always say about going forward with solar is that it's better to move quickly because most of these incentives are not guaranteed and some are actually set to sunset on a specific schedule. Also want to add that solar is eligible for accelerated depreciation, including 100% year one bonus depreciation at the federal level. And also, if it's affordable housing, some are eligible for low-income housing tax credits, and combining all those can really improve the economics of the system. So this can give you a view of what a 25-year lifetime solar project would look like. On the left graph, this is a scenario which includes all tax credits. And you can see that within the first 4 years, with claiming all the tax credits and beginning to produce electricity in year one, you're able to pay back the cost of the system. And after that, you're generating free electricity for the rest of the lifetime, which can be over 25 years. And the reason it goes up over time is because the cost of electricity increases and the value of solar we anticipate to increase with that. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise here, the perks of working at home. There's a mower outside. So on the right, excluding tax credits. So this is if you were unable to claim the investment tax credit or accelerated depreciation of assets. But you can see that even with some of the remaining incentives and the value of solar as you generate electricity, that you're still able to pay back the system in a pretty reasonable time frame. So we're going to go into a sample solar project. This is a building located in the Bronx, and this is a retrofit type. So this building is being undergoing capital improvements, a new roof, and solar is being installed on it. It's not a prevailing wage scenario. This is a really large multifamily building. So we mentioned, a lot of the projects we work with are 15 to 50 kilowatts. This is 120 kilowatts. And because of that, the price per watt is quite low. Also, it's a ballasted system, which means that it's one of the more affordable installation types. So for this project, we see a 4-year payback period, an IRR of 17%, and a lifetime net savings of about $600,000, close to $600,000. And the solar energy is offsetting owner-paid electricity costs. So looking at this on a more granular 25-year cash flow, so you can see the total installed cost at the top, and the New York Sun incentive that I described earlier immediately reduces the cost of the system so that the upfront cost of the installer is reduced to about $300,000. Then when you apply the accelerated depreciation and the federal tax credit, you get to a post-incentive cost of about $70,000. There's also a property tax abatement applied in this scenario. So everything in green is the benefits, the red is the cost, and this payback period, as we mentioned, is 4 years. I'll just note that in the inverter replacement, that's a cost down the line, which is usually covered by the amount of electricity savings that you would see in 1 year. So how do you pay for such a system? Financing options can make solar economically viable for most buildings that have suitable roofs for solar, and we're here to advise you on that. So we think of it as direct ownership or third-party ownership are the two paths to take. When you do a cash purchase, you can either pay from reserves or you can get a loan. Or if you want a zero down option, you can go into third-party ownership. We'll show that on the next slides. So for the cash purchase, so ownership generally provides the best long-term financial savings, especially if the owner can benefit from all the tax incentives and able to take advantage of all the electricity savings going directly to them. The third-party ownership scenario is a good option if you want to benefit from solar without any upfront costs. And if the owner is unable to directly benefit from the tax credits, so a nonprofit, a real estate investment trust, then this is a way to still recoup some of the value of solar. What it looks like is that a third-party solar company will install a system on your roof. They'll own the system, and they will own all the electricity that's generated on the roof. And you enter into a contract with them and purchase that electricity at a discounted cost. So you're able to save money every year and for the lifetime of that system. Community solar is another scenario that we talk about for people who want to be subscribers to offsite community solar projects. All right, any questions about solar economics and how to save money with solar?
Yes, thank you, Marigo. There are a few questions. There was one question from the section before that I think you addressed, but I'll just put it back to the public. The first one is from Monique, and it says, is there a great difference in the type of solar, in the type of installation, I believe, ballasted and other types? Like she's asking about pricing, and maybe you can quickly sum up a response for her.
Yeah. So the pricing that we might see, so if we're looking at like a $3 a watt ballasted installation, we might see something like a 50 cents a watt increase for a mechanically integrated system. It depends on whether you're doing sort of a low tilt mechanically penetrated system or something larger, especially than the canopy system that's 9 feet above the surface of the roofs, can end up being about $1 per watt more. So, you know, we're looking, it's significant, but certainly with a large project, it can be economically viable. And when we look at a roof, sometimes a roof is a good candidate for both kinds of systems. So when we run the economic analysis for you all, we can show 2 different scenarios so you can see how the pricing pans out.
Awesome. So now we have a few questions on financing and savings. The first one came on a private chat, and it basically asked, does the tax abatement make your building go into rent stabilization?
Yeah, and so I'll take that one. It does not. The property tax abatement really does not have strings attached to it. The solar property tax abatement is an incentive that basically, if you install a solar energy system, you get 20% of that investment returned to you in the form of a property tax abatement over the course of a 4-year period. So 5% of your investment per year for 4 years. We should note that there are some, if you're already getting certain other abatements, they can't be combined. But the vast majority of New York City buildings that pay property taxes are eligible for the solar property tax abatement.
Awesome. And now a question regarding financings, and this is specifically about PACE from Valerie. Is PACE for New York City residential buildings ready yet? And then she makes a suggestion saying that if PACE was available, we could persuade more owners to go solar.
Do you want to talk about PACE, Noah?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question, Valerie. So PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, and it is a financing program that a lot of municipalities around the country offer, where energy efficiency and clean energy projects can be repaid through an assessment on a property tax bill. It's a good structure for financing clean energy projects that have a long payback period, where you're making a capital improvement that kind of stays with the building. It can be really beneficial to encouraging owners to do projects, even if they're maybe considering only holding their property for 3-4 years. Well, that's an improvement where you get it's going to improve your NOI because your loan payment is less than your utility bill savings. And then that stays with the building in a really simple way. New York State offers PACE financing. New York City has been on the cusp of launching a PACE financing program for some time. It still is not yet live. We eagerly await the availability of PACE financing in New York City, and we're hoping it will reduce the cost of capital for energy efficiency and clean energy projects. Hopefully at some point this year that will go live.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noah. There is a question on affordable housing by Mike, and he's asking, are there any extra incentives for affordable housing?
Yeah, great question. So the New York Sun incentive, the rebate that I mentioned earlier, there's a base amount that applies to multifamily buildings in general. And then there's something called the affordable adder that adds 50 cents a watt to the rebate. So when we do an analysis for affordable building, we include that incentive.
And in addition,
it has some limitations in terms of system size. Yeah, up to 50 kilowatts of your project. But for a lot of buildings that are, if you're under 50 kilowatts, it would apply to the whole project.
And then another incentive to consider for those buildings that are going to the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development, or working on a recapitalization with the state agency, if there are low-income housing tax credits involved in your solar in your development project, solar can be included in the basis for the low-income housing tax credits. And you can claim the investment tax credit. There's some interaction between the two, where if you take the investment tax credit, it slightly reduces your basis for the low-income housing tax credit. But that can be a really good option. And most of the low-income housing tax credit syndicators also have an appetite for solar investment tax credits. So for those types of properties, the economics can look really good.
Awesome. There are many really good questions on the chat. One comes from Jonathan Cooper, and he is asking if you could please elaborate on the New York State property tax abatement, or the property tax abatement.
think we got that one.
Okay. And then the next question by Will Fisher, are cost savings expectations only for electric use in common areas, or are we assuming that, that the landlord provides electric to tenants within the lease? He's curious about what happens to the excess electricity if it exceeds the amount used in common areas as well.
Do you want to take that, Mary?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. You know, so sometimes we do an analysis where the building's able to offset the common area, and it's a good fit for the system size on the building, and that makes it pretty simple for landlords. There are some landlords who, when they're able to install a larger system beyond the common area electricity, they do consider participating in some sort of informal program within their building where they distribute excess solar energy credits to the tenants themselves and ask for some sort of payback in return in the form of the rental payment. And there's a few different ways to do it. Noah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I guess what I could add is that for a building that has just a massive roof and a low owner-paid electric bill, an owner might instead install a large solar energy system and then put in a new Con Edison meter for their solar array and actually just sell all of those credits through a broker that manages community shared solar. Community shared solar is a program that makes solar subscriptions available to really anyone in New York City. You could subscribe to a solar project. You could live in the Bronx and subscribe to a solar project in Queens and then receive credits on your electric bill. So that is an option that we've explored with some owners, and actually Jose worked with a building in Brooklyn that's doing a project of that nature where the owner's offsetting their common area bill, and then they've got a whole bunch of additional solar capacity where they're actually just selling the credits. So they get utility bill savings, the tax incentives, and they're getting some revenue through the sale of electricity.
Awesome. There is a question from Kate on roof and solar. Really great question. If your roof is not new, but not in terrible shape, would a ballasted system make sense? And then is it easier to remove and reinstall in case a new roof needs to be added or replaced, if the roof needs to be replaced?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think that, look, we would not recommend putting a ballasted system on a roof that is actively leaking or you anticipate is going to have real issues in the next couple of years. Frankly, it'll just be a hassle. So our recommendation would always be, at bare minimum, have your roof evaluated and do preservation work, so patching and sealing before you put your solar array in. But absolutely, you can put solar on a midlife roof. You just need to plan that at some point, 5 years, 10 years in the future, you would need to remove the solar when you're doing your major roof repairs or replacement. There is an incremental cost associated with removing a system and reinstalling it. Generally speaking, that's offset by the utility bill savings and tax bill savings that the solar project delivers. So, in a lot of cases, it still makes sense to do a project when you're midlife on your roof, as long as you take that into consideration and kind of plan for that expense. And to answer your question directly, I think that removing and reinstalling a ballasted system would be a little bit cheaper than a mechanically attached system.
Awesome. One last question on this section, and this is more of a case scenario provided by Monique. Basically, if one owns a 3-family home, will the electricity benefits only go to that home, or will the tenants also benefit from solar? And if I were to take a solar loan, will this loan also, will there be incentives affiliated to the loan? And then just a point of clarification, if our nonprofit will be able to explain everything in detail to them. So that's the questions. There's a couple of questions. Basically, will the electricity benefit just the home or the tenants as well? And with the person was taking out a loan, will there be incentives with it? And can we explain a little bit more on our services to the public?
Sure. I mean, I guess what I'll say first is, Monique, we're happy to talk with you about solar for your building and help you figure out a plan. But, for a 3-unit building, sure, you could put solar on the rooftop, and depending on how much roof area you have and how big your electric bill, most typically what an owner will do is they'll offset their own unit where they live, And then if they have more room on their roof, they'll put a slightly larger system and also offset the common area bill. So we often brownstones and 3-unit buildings will still have a common area bill. It's pretty small just for the hallway lights and stuff like that. But that would be one approach. If you wanted to do a larger system and offer utility bill savings to your tenants, you could, and then you would need to work out with the tenants, what kind of remuneration they would make for that benefit. And then actually, I'm really glad you asked about financing because NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, just announced in response to the impacts of COVID-19 on our clean energy industry, they just announced for the next 12 months that they're offering 0% interest on loans for clean energy projects for 1 to 4 family homes. And so most of the buildings we work with don't qualify for it because we tend to work with larger buildings. But for your building, which is 3 units, you would likely qualify for that. It's called the Green Jobs, Green New York loan program. And they're currently offering 0% interest for loans that are up to 15-year term for residential applications. So would definitely encourage you to take a look at that, and happy to chat with you about that offline.
Awesome. And then one more question that just came in. People are really interested, which is awesome. It's about community share solar. So if you own a portfolio of buildings and have a large solar array in one of the buildings, can you buy excess solar energy produced from that building yourself or another small building without solar, so that the other buildings in your portfolio are also benefiting from solar?
Yeah, that's a great question. In order to yes, you can distribute solar energy credits from one building you own to another. There are a few programmatic requirements. So in order to have your own sort of offset community solar distribution, you need to there need to be 10 recipients. So if you have 10 other buildings, you can distribute to all of them. There are a few other strategies. If you fell short of that requirement, there's something called remote net metering, where you can distribute to another account in your name. Usually the value of solar is not quite as high there. So there are a lot of creative scenarios, and I guess the short answer is yes, and we can help you figure out just how to strategize with that.
Okay, great. No more questions.
Great. Okay, let's keep moving because we've got one more section, which we're excited to dive into. And so this is a section on specific considerations for owners, and just based on our experience working with a variety of landlords in the city on their solar projects, these are some common questions that come up. And so we're going to do this in kind of a discussion talking head format. So solar strategies. In addition to direct tax bill and utility bill savings, what are some other benefits of installing solar? So Marigo, what do you typically say when you're working with a client, and I guess what are the other motivators for them beyond the financial ones?
Yeah, sometimes it's PR, right? So a large like real estate company putting solar across all its buildings is really big news. It's still exciting. There's some competition up there for some of the largest projects to outbeat each other in terms of system size. Attracting tenants who are excited about living in a building that's well managed and has up-to-date technology. And this sort of leads into the next question, but there are going to be more sort of incentives over time to have solar on your building as the city advances its renewable energy goals. So I guess skipping to that.
Great. Yeah. So the next question is, how will solar benefit me in terms of compliance with Local Law 97? So Local Law 97 is the signature bill of the Climate Mobilization Act that New York City's City Council passed last April. And Local Law 97 essentially puts a price on carbon for buildings in New York City that goes into effect in 2024, where large buildings in particular will be given a budget of how much they're allowed to emit. And if your building emits more than that, then you'll either need to pay a penalty to the DOB for those excess emissions, or you'll need to buy some kind of offset on a carbon market that the city is creating. So, doing a solar project is going to be kind of, regardless of where you are relative to your carbon budget for your building, there are going to be financial benefits associated with reducing your emissions. If you are above your carbon budget, or you anticipate that you will be, putting solar on your rooftop is going to significantly reduce those emissions and maybe get you below the budget, so you're not subject to those fines. And if you're below your carbon budget or you're at your carbon budget, doing a clean energy project that gets you below it could allow you to then actually sell your credits on an exchange to another building owner who hasn't done a good job getting their emissions down. So there's certainly a very concrete benefit in that. And then this last question is one that we've been getting recently, where we talk to owners who just kind of say pretty bluntly, like, they're not making capital improvements right now, particularly for rent-regulated buildings, because of the state's recent legislation and the broader financial situation. So they ask basically, why should we even consider solar in this environment? And the case that we make is that if you look at a solar project as a standalone investment, it's incredibly strong. And what you're doing is you're reducing the tax bills and the utility bills for your properties. So it's harder to increase your revenue on a rent-regulated building today than it was 2 years ago. That being said, reducing expenses is one of the best ways to increase your net operating income. And it's something that, again, is going to be, you're going to have to pay for your common area electric regardless of almost anything. So that's typically what we say there. This next set of questions is about project timing. When is the right time to proceed with a solar project? What are the risks of moving ahead now, and what are the risks of waiting?
Sure, I'm happy to tackle that. So as we mentioned before, we typically encourage solar projects to move now with the awareness of step downs in the incentives, and so that including the step down in the ITC, and also the New York Sun incentive, the rebate. So far only has a certain amount available, and it's done on a per watt basis. So as more projects come online and use up that incentive, there'll be less available over time. Noah, what do you think the risks of moving ahead now is, if any?
Well, there's a theoretical risk that that the costs will decline significantly, or the technology will improve significantly. But what I can say on that is that if we look back 5 years, 6 years, that really hasn't proven to be the case. The technology is improving incrementally. So panels today are slightly more efficient than they were a couple of years ago. But our recommendation, generally speaking, is to move ahead today and to use kind of best-in-class technology of today. Great. And then this next question, excuse the typo here. I have a roof replacement scheduled. Should I proceed with solar at the same time, or should I wait until the roof is complete? So Marigo, what would you say to this one?
It's a great question. So since the process of putting a project out to bid, getting a contract with the installer and having the installer actually begin the process of permitting and interconnection, since it takes a few months, we actually recommend that you can move forward with developing your solar project now, even if you're not actually going to do the install until after the roof is complete. And I will say that there are some advantages of starting these processes in conjunction, because when there's a tear off or any kind of roof analysis or engineering that's happening, can help the installer figure out the best way to design the system. So that would include photos of the roof structure or roof diagrams. And so sometimes we'll have installers actually be in dialogue with the roofers to sort of coordinate the projects.
Great. And then one other point on this, roofing companies will typically, if you install solar on top of their roof and they've got a manufacturer warranty on it, they'll typically give you a continuance on your warranty, provided that the installation is done properly, but they will likely try to charge an inspection fee. Now, if you're going out to bid for your roofer and you tell your roofer up front, we're planning to do solar, when you're negotiating your contract with them, you can typically get them to waive any inspection fees. So there's also a cost saving opportunity there. Okay, and then these are some concrete considerations for when you know that you're doing a solar project. Who from the building or management company is reviewing the solar installation contract? What are the building's requirements regarding methods of site access, work hours, and final solar design approval? And then who from the building or management company is overseeing the project from contractor selection through completion? So these are just things for you to think about with your solar project. And frankly, these are not unique to solar. These are things for really any building improvement. So you may have, your own system for doing this, which is great. And you may just be looking for a little bit of solar expertise to ensure that it all goes smoothly. And then the last consideration for owner that we want to raise here is operations and maintenance. So once the system's installed, again, there's not a huge amount of maintenance that is required for a solar energy system. It's fairly plug and play, and every system has online monitoring, so you can kind of see how it's doing. But important things to consider are what are the solar company's obligations to the building regarding the system performance? So do they have a workmanship warranty? Do they have an actual performance guarantee based on energy yield? Are there service level agreements in the contract about how quickly they'll respond if you do report an issue to them? And then, a couple other questions are just who's going to have access to the solar monitoring system? How often is someone from your building can actually take a look at that? So if you're investing in a solar energy system, and let's say it's a 6-figure investment, you want to make sure you get that return. And so we will recommend that, at minimum on an annual basis, you take a look at your energy yield and compare it to what was forecast. And then what's the procedure for reporting any potential performance issues to the solar company? So those are just some things that we'd want to make sure that you think through as you move your solar project forward. So I realize we're getting close to time, so I'm going to speed through these slides where I just show very quickly our model again. So if following this you're interested in solar for your building, your portfolio, the first step would be to share your building list or your building's address and a recent owner-paid electric bill. With that information, we'll put together a remote solar design and a financial analysis, and we'll do a phone consultation. We'll do that all completely free of charge. And then if you decide that you want to move forward with a solar project and you do want to contract with us to provide more comprehensive technical assistance, then we'll do an on-site assessment where we'll do a shade study of the roof. We'll take photos of the rooftop, potential locations for conduit, your electric room, really all the documentation that we would need to kind of confirm our solar design, but also to put together a really comprehensive request for proposal so that you get firm pricing from solar companies. We would then go out to bid and get you bids from solar companies. We've got a list of about a dozen companies that have a lot of experience here in the city that we have pre-qualified. We're very flexible. If you have solar companies you want added to the list or removed from the list, that's fine. We solicit bids on your behalf, get those bids, help level the bids and put together a bid comparison form, and then walk you through that and support you with installer interviews and contractor selection. And that's really it. And again, the goal of this whole program is to help you generate clean, affordable energy, reducing your operating expenses, and helping out our city. So with that, I do want to thank you all for joining us, for your time. If you do want a free solar consultation, our emails are on the screen, and we do encourage you to follow up. We'll send a follow-up email out tomorrow with a link to this presentation and a recording of it. So, if you want to respond to that, we're happy to start the process. And I think we do have about 5 minutes left for additional Q&A.
Yes, we have a couple of questions. One comes from Mike. It's on Local Law 97, and it asks, does Local Law 97 compel owners to put up solar or green roof if replacing a roof?
Marigo, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the local law applies to certain kinds of new construction, and also if you're doing any kind of major renovation that would involve a DOB permit. So if you're actually adding a new roof layer, any kind of major structural, when I say a new roof layer, I meant like a new floor, a new story. So if you're just doing like a roof tear off or a membrane replacement, it shouldn't trigger local law 97.
And just to clarify, local law 97 puts a price on carbon emissions.
Oh,
and
sorry.
It's local laws 92 and local law 94 that require solar or green roof for all new construction and major renovation.
Awesome. And then we have a really great question again on affordable housing by Kate. And it reads, I work for a nonprofit affordable housing company. The Solar One provides pro bono assistance in applying for incentives for new construction projects and oversees solar installation. Or do we need to hire an energy consultant?
Kate, it's a great question. So, as a nonprofit organization, we do offer pro bono services for other affordable housing nonprofits. We're happy to talk with you offline and learn more about your project and portfolio and how we can support you. And we've worked with a lot of affordable housing nonprofits on solar here in the city, including supportive housing groups like Nazareth Housing and Housing Works, and larger portfolio owners like Fifth Avenue Committee and the Joint Ownership Entity and St. Nick's Alliance. And we'd love to talk with you about solar for your buildings.
Great. And with that, I do not see any more questions on the chat.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up a few minutes early then, and I first just want to thank you all for your time and your interest for seriously considering solar for your building and doing something positive for our city. I think our city needs good news now more than ever. So just hope that everyone stays healthy, and like I said, we're going to send out a follow-up note and hope to be working with you all on projects.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Take care.